Jay Leno spent years behind The Tonight Show desk, smiling through interviews and keeping Hollywood comfortable on camera. But not every guest made the experience easy, and some left memories that lingered long after the show ended. A few celebrities crossed lines, disrespected the crew, or acted like the rules didn't apply to them. Leno might have laughed on air, but behind that grin, he was taking notes. When he finally revealed the names he never wanted back, it surprised people. Even the nicest guy in late night has limits. So who made that list? And what really happened behind the scenes? Trista Sutter. Jay Leno's decades on The Tonight Show brought him face-to-face with thousands of guests, but not all conversations were memorable for good reasons. One appearance he singled out as particularly awkward was his interview with the Bachelorette contestant Trista Sutter. Reflecting on that episode years later, Leno admitted the experience was a nightmare, largely because he had no context for the reality TV star's background and found the interaction difficult to sustain. According to his own recounting, he had never watched the show and struggled to find common ground during the conversation, making it feel, to him, flat and unengaging.
And touching on how to bring about more gratitude in those areas. But I think it's also about really in the bad times being grateful for those things too, because they really are the moments that teach us the lessons that we need to.
Leno's candid description of the moment revealed broader challenges late-night hosts face when booking guests driven by fleeting reality fame rather than widespread cultural impact. As he explained, he was so disconnected from the subject that, after the show wrapped, he encountered Sutter in the studio parking lot and initially failed to recognize her. Only after she told him her name did he realize who she was, an anecdote he shared with humor, but also a certain professional frankness. Sutter herself responded with grace on social media years later, joking about the conversation and even promoting her book in reply to Leno's retelling. But for the host, the episode became emblematic of how certain interviews simply failed to click, not due to personal animosity, but because the conversation lacked chemistry. These experiences underlined the difficulty of bridging generational and cultural gaps in late-night television. Jay Leno and David Letterman shared one of late night's most enduring and publicly examined rivalries, shaped as much by industry politics as by personal and professional perceptions. While not known for outright hostility, their relationship was long framed by competition for The Tonight Show hosting gig and differing approaches to humor and talk show pacing. Although Leno has publicly downplayed animosity in recent years, earlier interactions were often awkward enough to become fodder for media narratives about tension in late night.
There's not, and you probably know this as a comic, you go through life and when you're starting out and you meet people who just don't get you.
Their complicated history stems back to television's shifting landscape in the early 1990s, when Leno was chosen over Letterman to succeed Johnny Carson as host of The Tonight Show. Although both went on to enjoy successful careers, the decision left lingering resentment and a sense of unfinished business that observers and critics followed closely. Leno himself recounted at least one uneasily remembered visit to Letterman's home, describing it as a mistake, suggesting how the personal and professional lines could blur in their interactions. Over time, however, the pair have offered more nuanced public statements, with Leno expressing respect for Letterman's craft despite past tensions. Media coverage of their interactions has ranged from speculation about behind-the-scenes friction to acknowledgement that two strong comedic voices simply had different approaches and priorities. The Leno-Letterman dynamic is illustrative of how long-standing industry competition can shape public perceptions of talk show hosts, even in the absence of explicit personal animosity. It highlights that in late-night television, where ratings and legacy are continually measured against peers, a guest's tension with a host can sometimes reflect broader career narratives rather than specific, isolated interviews or appearances. One of the most talked about guest appearances in Jay Leno's career didn't just make headlines, it sparked a long-running professional rivalry. In 2010, Jimmy Kimmel appeared on The Jay Leno Show at a time when Leno was reeling from the controversial Tonight Show succession saga involving Conan O'Brien and NBC. Rather than promote his book or showbiz news, Kimmel used the platform to take sharp jabs at Leno, poking fun at the very network drama that had dogged Leno's late-night tenure. According to Leno, the jokes weren't just light ribbing. Kimmel's comments publicly mocked the circumstances around Leno's return to The Tonight Show and the fallout from the network's controversial host shuffle. Leno later admitted that he let the segment air unedited, a decision he now calls a mistake, telling interviewer Graham Bensinger that he should pay the price for allowing what he described as a humiliation on his own show.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed your participation in the Jay Leno scandal.
Oh, thank you. That's scandal.
The exchange was widely shared and dissected within media circles, in part because Kimmel's humor cut directly at a point of professional vulnerability for Leno. though years later the two publicly patched things up, with Kimmel noting they made peace after a personal family event. The moment remains a defining interaction in Leno's resume of on-air guest dynamics. The Kimmel interview revealed how disarming even seasoned hosts can be when a fellow comedian turns the tables. For Leno, it highlighted the complexities of live television, where a guest can pivot an interview into commentary on industry politics and legacy, leaving the host to navigate the fallout. Howard Stern radio personality. Howard Stern may not have been a traditional booked guest on The Tonight Show every night, but his stance toward Jay Leno over the years amounts to one of Leno's most persistent public criticisms from another media figure. Stern's critiques stemmed from long-standing industry tensions over style, technique, and late-night politics. In the 1990s, Stern and Leno crossed paths as high-profile entertainers at different ends of the broadcast world. Stern publicly accused Leno of borrowing comedic bits or repurposing segments without attribution, and wasn't shy about vocalizing his disdain on his own radio platforms and public appearances.
He's an idiot?
Yeah.
Brad is?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't have that experience with him.
Now, aren't you the
What
same?
happened to you?
But
Brad Gray is an idiot.
it's that level of guy.
Why don't you say that about Jay Leno? I like your spirit.
A particularly charged flashpoint occurred when Leno hired John Melendez, known as Stuttering John, as his announcer, a move that reportedly stoked further animosity from Stern, whose radio show helped make Melendez a known figure. Stern berated Leno on air, accusing him of ripping him off, and even leveling personal insults in the context of late-night talk show rivalries. Stern's role in Leno's guest history is unique because the criticisms weren't confined to a single interview. They were part of an ongoing media dialogue about comedic ownership, respect, and legacy. Stern's commentary on Leno often intertwined with broader industry stories, such as The Tonight Show succession conflicts and late-night host dynamics, giving his critiques extra resonance among fans and media observers alike. For Leno, Stern's dissatisfaction wasn't just a one-off moment, but part of how his public persona was critiqued by one of radio's most uncompromising voices, making Stern one of the most significant critical voices in the context of Leno's guest history. Not every challenging guest interaction on Jay Leno's Tonight Show was about rivalry or critique. Some crossed into unexpected territory. Comedian Bobcat Goldthwait carved out a particularly notorious moment in talk show history during his 1994 appearance with Leno. Known for his off-kilter performance style, Goldthwait took an unusual approach during what was meant to be a standard interview segment. He produced lighter fluid and lit the guest chair on fire mid-taping, creating a dangerous situation on a live studio set.
Bob, you set a talk show on fire one time.
Yeah, I did set a talk show on fire. Yeah. And then that was back when people liked Leno, so it even was a little more ballsy. They were like, "Why'd you do that?" You know. And then I'm convicted arson.
The stunt wasn't purely an improvised bit. Goldthwait was reportedly acting out of frustration over the cancellation of a different talk show, and his chaotic approach extended beyond this appearance. He was famous for outrageous behavior on other late-night shows and at comedy venues. After igniting the chair, Leno and the other guest had to douse the flames with water, and the incident was aired as part of the broadcast. Goldthwait later faced misdemeanor charges for recklessly causing a fire and was fined and required to film public safety messages as part of the aftermath. For Leno, this wasn't just an uncomfortable interview. It was a moment that tested live broadcast safety protocols and challenged the assumption that guests would stick to standard talk show norms. The physical danger introduced into the studio elevated what might otherwise have been a quirky comedy moment into an incident with legal and logistical repercussions. The Goldthwait episode remains one of the most unusual guest-related moments in Tonight Show history and stands apart from rivalries or critiques as an instance where a guest's unpredictable performance forced both host and crew to respond in real time to an unexpected crisis. One of the most widely discussed conflicts in Jay Leno's career involved fellow late-night host Conan O'Brien, centered on the highly publicized 2010 Tonight Show conflict. That year, NBC attempted a dramatic reshuffling. Leno had agreed to hand over the Tonight Show top spot to O'Brien after years of hosting, only to return to a competing primetime slot that eventually preceded O'Brien's new late-night tenure. When ratings faltered and NBC opted to move Leno back to the 11:30 p.m. time slot, O'Brien balked and ultimately left the network. The resulting fiasco became Hollywood water cooler talk and left a lasting rift in industry circles.
Jay, of course, one of the few tyrants still alive. And all of his friends got together and had a party. They had a cake, and Jay, this is an interesting point, Jay cut the cake with the same knife he stuck in Conan's back.
Numerous comics, critics, and entertainment figures openly rallied behind O'Brien, criticizing Leno's role in the chain of events and suggesting the veteran host's decisions undermined a colleague's opportunity. Comedian Patton Oswalt, for instance, lamented Leno's approach, characterizing it less as professional rivalry and more as a betrayal of late-night tradition. O'Brien himself later addressed the mess with wry humor and frank commentary. In reflections about the incident, he explained that he and Leno had different visions for the franchise, and that the awkwardness lingered long after the ratings dust settled. Some industry insiders suggest the two simply never found common ground after the debacle, with O'Brien's bemused barbs and creative jabs keeping the memory alive in comedy lore. Although both hosts have pursued their own paths since, the Tonight Show controversy remains a defining moment in Leno's career story, one that illustrates not just competition in television, but how creative priorities and contractual decisions can strain professional bonds and shape public perceptions for years. While Jay Leno has not been openly hostile toward many colleagues in comments, Patton Oswalt stands out among comedians who have publicly criticized him, and in doing so, helped highlight deeper tensions within the comedy community. Oswalt's critiques didn't revolve around personal animosity in the tabloid-esque sense, but rather a pointed critique of Leno's position during one of late night's most controversial transitions, the 2010 Tonight Show conflict. In interviews and public commentary, Oswalt openly questioned Leno's motivations and choices, framing them as antithetical to what many saw as the spirit of the comedy world.
I'm bringing you something really, I'm bringing you the elixir that heals the world, and it's the dumbest stuff you've ever heard. It's so perfect.
Oswalt went beyond simple critique. He suggested that Leno's hold-on-to-power approach, particularly his decision to reclaim the Tonight Show slot at the expense of Conan O'Brien's tenure, betrayed a sense of stewardship that some comedians believe should guide legendary franchises. Instead of celebrating O'Brien's vision, Oswalt felt Leno's actions prioritized ratings and self-interest over artistic growth. This perspective didn't just express mild displeasure, it amounted to a rebuke from one comedian to another, a condemnation that resonated within stand-up circles. Critics like Oswalt also drew comparisons that underlined their disillusionment. Some framed Leno's tactics as emblematic of a broader conservatism in late-night comedy, risk-averse, populist, and unwilling to embrace innovation. That kind of critique, especially coming from a respected voice in alternative comedy, functioned as more than humor. It was a substantive questioning of Leno's legacy and choices. For his part, Leno has largely remained measured about such criticism, often deflecting or framing it as part of the competitive nature of television. But Oswalt's comments stand as a vivid example of how peers, not just rival hosts, can shape the narrative around Leno's role in comedy history. Leno welcomed the spotlight and the guests, but not everyone measured up. Celebrities who annoyed him, producers who mismanaged expectations, and colleagues who crossed the line all faced his quiet judgment. The question isn't whether he kept score, it's whether they should have earned his patience, and whether you could have lasted on that stage, under the scrutiny of a host who noticed everything.